The council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive station built by a dozen species over 3 centuries. Inside the main hall, representatives from across the galaxy gathered around a circular platform that glowed with soft blue light. The meeting had been called to address a growing problem. The Krethon Empire had been making aggressive moves toward peaceful trading colonies, and tensions were rising fast. Captain Jake Morrison stood near the entrance with his small delegation. He wore the standard uniform of Earth's stellar navy, simple and functional compared to the elaborate outfits worn by other species. Next to him stood Chief Engineer Amy Patterson, a woman in her 30s with practical short hair and steady eyes. On his other side was Ben Cooper, his tactical officer, a young man who kept his expression neutral despite the stares they were receiving. The human ship, the HSS Endurance, was docked at the station's outer ring. Through the massive windows, several alien delegates had already seen it. Morrison could hear their whispered comments even from across the chamber. The ship looked nothing like the sleek vessels favored by other species. It was bulky, almost box-like, with thick plating covering most of its hull. Compared to the needle-thin interceptors or the flowing organic shapes of bioships, the Endurance looked like something from another era. Commander Zalthor of the Krethon Empire was the first to speak openly. He was tall, covered in dark scales, with 4 arms that he used for dramatic gestures. His voice carried across the chamber with obvious amusement. "The humans wish to contribute to peacekeeping efforts," Zalthor said, his mouth parts clicking in what passed for Krethon laughter. "With that vessel? I have seen cargo haulers with better acceleration curves." Several other delegates joined in the laughter. Morrison kept his face calm, though he felt Amy tense beside him. The insectoid Vextari representative, a being called Tixal, with compound eyes and clicking mandibles, consulted a datapad. "I have reviewed the specifications transmitted by the human vessel," Tixal announced in a buzzing voice. "Its maximum velocity is 42% of standard military-grade warships. Its acceleration is similarly inadequate. I calculate it would take this ship 3 times longer to reach a combat zone than our interceptor class." More murmurs spread through the chamber. The crystalline Luminar delegates, beings of living light contained in geometric shells, pulsed with colors that Morrison's translator rendered as skeptical commentary. One of them spoke in tones like wind chimes. "We mean no disrespect to humanity's offering," the Luminar said. "But we must question the wisdom of deploying such an outdated design. The Krethon threat requires speed and maneuverability. This human ship appears to possess neither quality." Morrison stepped forward to the speaking platform. The chamber's systems detected his movement and amplified his voice automatically. "The Endurance may not be the fastest ship in the fleet," he said calmly, "but she's reliable and well-armed. We believe we can contribute to maintaining peace in the disputed sectors." Zalthor made that clicking laugh again. "Well-armed? Captain Morrison, your vessel's weapon ports are visible even through that excessive armor. Standard plasma cannons, unless I am mistaken. Every military ship in this chamber outguns you by a factor of 3. And what good are weapons if you cannot catch your enemy?" The Krethon commander turned to address the wider council. "The Empire has the fastest attack fleet in known space. We have refined our tactics over centuries. Hit fast, strike hard, retreat before the enemy can respond. This is modern warfare. That human ship looks like it was designed to sit in one place and wait to be destroyed." Several council members nodded in agreement. Morrison noticed that even the more sympathetic delegates looked doubtful. Amy leaned close and whispered, "Should I correct their assumptions about our weapon systems?" Morrison shook his head slightly. "Not yet. Let them think what they want." The council's lead coordinator, an elderly Valorian with silver skin and wise eyes, raised a hand for silence. "The Council appreciates humanity's willingness to assist in this crisis. However, we must consider the practical realities. Captain Morrison, your ship's capabilities are clearly suited for defensive positions rather than rapid response scenarios. We can handle whatever assignment you give us," Morrison replied. The Valorian coordinator consulted with other senior members. After several minutes of quiet discussion, she addressed the chamber again. Very well. The human vessel will be assigned to Patrol Route 7, Sector 19. This is a low-priority zone, far from current Crethon activity. You will monitor trade routes and report any unusual movements. Morrison recognized the assignment for what it was. They were being placed as far from actual combat as possible, given a role that would keep them out of the way. It was diplomatic courtesy, nothing more. But he simply nodded. Understood. The Endurance will depart within the hour. As the human delegation left the chamber, Morrison could hear the conversations that resumed behind them. More laughter from Zalthor. Sympathetic, but dismissive comments from others. The general consensus was clear. Humanity had tried to help, but they were simply not equipped for modern galactic warfare. Walking through the station's corridors toward their docking berth, Ben Cooper finally spoke up. They think we're a joke, sir. I know, Morrison said. The Crethon commander was particularly insulting, Amy added. Should we have corrected some of his assumptions? Morrison smiled slightly as they approached the airlock to their ship. Through the window, the Endurance sat in its berth, looking slow and heavy and outdated. Exactly as intended. No need to correct anything, he said. In fact, their assumptions are going to be very useful soon. Amy and Ben exchanged glances. They had served with Morrison long enough to recognize that tone. Their captain was planning something. As they boarded the ship, Morrison passed through the familiar corridors. Crew members saluted as he went by. These men and women had trained for months on the Endurance. They knew her secrets. They understood what she really was beneath that heavy armor plating. On the bridge, Morrison settled into his command chair. The view screen showed the council station slowly rotating against the star field. Lieutenant Linda Hayes at the communications station turned to him. Sir, we're receiving departure clearance. Route 7. Sector 19 as assigned. The coordinator's office sent a message saying they'll call us back if we're needed elsewhere. Her tone made it clear what she thought of that possibility. Acknowledged, Morrison said. Helm, take us out. Standard peacetime configuration. No need to rush. The Endurance detached from the station with careful, slow movements. Its engines glowed with minimal power output. The massive ship turned with all the grace of a floating warehouse and began moving away from the station at an almost leisurely pace. Inside the station, monitoring systems tracked the human vessel's departure. In various ships docked nearby, alien crews watched the Endurance crawl away and shook their heads or made their species-equivalent gesture of disbelief. On the bridge of his own vessel, Commander Zalthor reviewed 3 weeks passed with little incident. The Endurance maintained its patrol route through Sector 19, checking trade vessels and monitoring comm traffic. The sector was quiet, far from any strategic importance. Captain Morrison used the time to run drills with his crew, keeping everyone sharp despite the boring assignment. Then everything changed at once. Lieutenant Linda Hayes was monitoring long-range communications when the first distress signal came through. Her face went pale as she listened to the transmission. Captain, we have multiple emergency broadcasts from the Dalmar colonies. They're under attack. It's the Crethon Empire, sir. Full military assault. Morrison was on his feet immediately. Put it on speakers. The bridge filled with panicked voices speaking over each other. Dalmar colonists screaming about ships appearing from nowhere. Military channels reporting orbital stations going dark. And underneath it all, the distinctive engine signatures that every military database recognized. Crethon fast attack cruisers. How many ships? Morrison asked. Hayes worked her console quickly. At least 30 confirmed, sir. Possibly more. They're using their standard hit-and-run tactics. Strike hard, retreat before defenders can respond, then hit somewhere else. Amy Patterson pulled up tactical data on her engineering station. Sir, the Dalmar system has minimal defenses. 3 orbital platforms and maybe a dozen patrol ships. They're not equipped for this kind of assault. Ben Cooper was already calculating response times. The Council will send reinforcements from the nearest military staging area. That's the Valorian Second Fleet. They're 4 hours away at maximum speed. What about us? Morrison asked quietly. Cooper checked the navigation data. We're 2 systems away. At our current speed, We would arrive in approximately 9 hours. 9 hours. Morrison knew what would happen in 9 hours. The Crethon would reduce the Dalmar colonies to rubble and disappear before the Endurance could even enter the system. He made his decision instantly. Helm, plot a direct course to Dalmar. Maximum speed. The helm officer, a young woman named Kelly Grant, hesitated. Sir, that's still going to put us hours behind the council response. We won't arrive in time to help. Plot the course, Morrison repeated firmly. Hayes was receiving another transmission. Sir, it's council command. They're ordering all available ships to respond to Dalmar. Tell them we're on our way. Hayes sent the message and listened to the response. Her expression grew frustrated. Sir, council command says we should maintain our current patrol. They say our ship is too slow to reach Dalmar in time to matter. They're suggesting we wait for new orders. Morrison felt anger rise in his chest but kept his voice level. Tell them the Endurance is responding whether they want us to or not. We don't leave civilians to die because someone thinks we're too slow. Hayes sent the message with clear satisfaction. The response came back quickly, and this time she actually smiled a little. Council command says if we insist on wasting fuel, that's our choice. They're not expecting us to accomplish anything useful. I'm sure they're not, Morrison said. Amy, start preparation sequences. Patterson's fingers flew across her console. Aye, sir. Beginning preliminary checks now. How far do you want to go? All the way. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Around the bridge, officers exchanged knowing looks. They had trained for this moment. Now, it was actually happening. In the Dalmar system, the battle was going exactly as the Crethon had planned. War leader Krexnar commanded the assault from his flagship, a sleek vessel built for speed and firepower. His ships struck in waves, destroying defensive positions with overwhelming force, then retreating before return fire could lock on. The Dalmar defenders fought bravely but hopelessly. Their patrol ships were designed for police work, not military combat. One by one, they were picked off by Crethon cruisers that appeared from nowhere, fired devastating volleys, and vanished into the darkness. Orbital stations exploded in silent flashes of light. Ground installations were targeted from orbit, their shields collapsing under repeated bombardment. Civilian transports fled the planet's surface in desperate evacuation attempts. Some made it. Many did not. The first Council reinforcements arrived 4 hours into the battle. Vex-Tari interceptors, fast and maneuverable, screamed into the system with weapons charged. Behind them came Luminar destroyers, their crystalline hulls glowing with stored energy weapons. Krexnar had expected this. His tactical officer identified each ship as it appeared and transmitted evasion patterns. The Crethon cruisers scattered, using speed and coordination that came from centuries of refined tactics. The Vex-Tari interceptors were fast, but the Crethon were faster. Every time the insectoid ships got a target lock, the Crethon vessel would execute a series of random direction changes and slip away. Return fire would tear through empty space where the target had been moments before. The Luminar destroyers tried a different approach, saturating entire zones with energy beams, but the Crethon simply avoided those zones, striking from unexpected angles and retreating before the Luminar could redirect their fire. Krexnar watched the battle unfold on his tactical display with satisfaction. This was what his people did best. Speed and unpredictability. The Council forces were stronger individually, but strength meant nothing if you could not hit your target. His communications officer reported more Council ships arriving, more interceptors, a few cruisers from the Valorian fleet. All fast, all well-armed, none of them fast enough. Maintain attack pattern 7, Krexnar ordered. Hit the northern continent's evacuation routes. These Council ships will chase us, and while they do, we accomplish our objectives. His fleet obeyed perfectly. 3 cruisers broke away and headed toward the planet's northern hemisphere, where civilian transports were lifting off in streams. The Council ships immediately moved to intercept, exactly as planned. The Crethon cruisers led them on a chase, staying just ahead of weapons range, while other Crethon vessels continued bombarding ground targets elsewhere. The battle had been going for 6 hours when Krexnar's long-range sensors detected something new. A single ship. Approaching from the outer system. Large. Moving slowly, he pulled up the identification data, and his face showed amusement. The human vessel, he said to his tactical staff. Still hours away. Mark it as low priority and ignore it. His tactical officer brought up detailed scans. War leader, the human ship is maintaining its approach. Current speed indicates arrival in 3 hours. 3 hours, Krexnar repeated. In 3 hours, we will have completed our objectives and be preparing to withdraw. Let the humans come. They will arrive in time to count bodies. Nothing more. Around the Dalmar system, the battle continued. More Krathon strikes. More council ships trying desperately to catch an enemy that refused to be caught. More civilians dying while their defenders chased shadows. On the bridge of the Endurance, Morrison watched the tactical display that showed real-time updates from the battle. Each red indicator represented a Krathon ship. Each blue marker was a council vessel. The reds were dancing around the blues, striking and retreating in patterns that looked almost like a dance. They're good, Ben Cooper said quietly. Their coordination is perfect. They know exactly how fast each council ship can respond and stay just outside that range. Yes, Morrison agreed. They're very good at fighting this way. They've been doing it for centuries. It's become predictable. Amy Patterson looked up from her engineering station. Sir, all systems are showing green. We're ready when you give the word. Morrison checked their position. Still outside the Dalmar system, but closing. The council forces were too busy chasing Krathon ships to pay attention to the slow human vessel creeping toward the battle. Not yet, Morrison said. Let's make sure we have their full attention first. I want every Krathon ship to know we're coming. I want them to see us and dismiss us. Then we show them what a real warship looks like. Hayes reported another transmission from Council Command. Sir, they're asking for our status. They want to know if we're really planning to enter an active combat zone in our condition. The Endurance crossed into the Dalmar system with all the urgency of a cargo hauler. Every military sensor in the area registered its arrival, calculated its speed, and classified it as irrelevant. The battle continued without pause. On the bridge, Captain Morrison studied the tactical display. 32 Krathon vessels were scattered across the inner system, executing their hit-and-run tactics with devastating efficiency. Council forces had grown to nearly 50 ships, but numbers meant nothing when you could not catch your target. All stations report ready, sir, Ben Cooper announced from the tactical station. Weapons systems are standing by, Morrison nodded. Amy, status on the primary systems? From her engineering console, Amy Patterson pulled up a series of displays that would have meant nothing to outside observers. All green, sir. Fusion core is at 15% output, as per normal operations. We can begin the startup sequence on your command. Linda, open a channel to all council forces. Make sure the Krathon can hear this too. Hayes worked her communications panel. Channel open, sir. Broadcasting on all military frequencies. Morrison stood and faced the main view screen. His voice was calm and professional. This is Captain Jake Morrison, of the Earth vessel Endurance, to all forces in the Dalmar system. We are entering the combat zone. Council ships, please maintain your current engagement patterns and stay clear of the western approach vector. We will handle things from here. Silence followed his announcement. Then, predictably, responses began flooding in. A Vextari commander's buzzing voice came through first. Human vessel, you are in no position to handle anything. Suggest you retreat to safe distance and provide evacuation support. Illuminar captain added their own thoughts. With respect, Captain Morrison, your ship's capabilities are insufficient for this engagement. We appreciate the gesture, but you should withdraw. And then, cutting through the other voices, came war leader Krexnar. The Krathon commander's tone carried open mockery. The slow human ship arrives at last. Tell me, Captain, do you plan to bore us to death? My vessels move 3 times faster than yours. You cannot catch us. You cannot hurt us. You are, As your own people might say, out of your league. Several Crethon ships altered course slightly, almost casually, to face the Endurance. They hung in space like predators observing prey that had wandered into the wrong territory. Morrison smiled. Amy, drop the armor. Full power to all systems. Ben, weapons free. Aye, sir, both officers replied in unison. What happened next would be analyzed and discussed in military academies for decades to come. The Endurance's exterior hull began to separate. Massive plates of thick armor, each weighing hundreds of tons, released from attachment points along the ship's body. Explosive bolts fired in coordinated sequences. The heavy plating that had made the ship look bulky and slow simply fell away into space. Beneath the armor was a completely different vessel. The true Endurance was lean and angular, covered in composite materials that absorbed sensor radiation. What everyone had assumed were simple plasma cannon ports were revealed to be something else entirely. Long rails ran along the ship's sides, magnetic accelerators that had been hidden under the thick plating. Weapon clusters emerged from concealed bays. Sensor arrays unfolded like mechanical flowers. But the most dramatic change was in performance. With the armor gone, the Endurance's mass dropped by nearly 40%. The fusion reactor that had been running at minimal output suddenly surged to full power. Engine output increased exponentially. The ship that had been crawling through space suddenly accelerated like a fighter craft. In seconds, the Endurance went from the slowest ship in the system to one of the fastest. On Krexnar's flagship, alarm systems began screaming. His tactical officer stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. War leader. The human ship's velocity is increasing. Current acceleration exceeds our fast cruisers. And these weapon signatures, they are not standard plasma cannons. I cannot identify the system type. Krexnar watched his displays in stunned silence. The slow, bulky human vessel was transforming before his eyes into something predatory and dangerous. And it was accelerating directly toward his fleet. All ships, evasive pattern Delta. Krexnar ordered, his voice tight. Spread formation. Do not let that ship get close. His fleet responded instantly. Decades of training overriding their shock. The Crethon cruisers scattered in all directions, using the speed and maneuverability that had made them dominant for so long. On the Endurance's bridge, Ben Cooper tracked each Crethon ship's movement. His tactical displays showed not where the enemy vessels were, but where they would be. Sophisticated prediction algorithms, developed from centuries of human warfare, calculated trajectory, velocity, and most importantly, pattern recognition. I have firing solutions on all priority targets, sir, Cooper reported. Crethon ships are following evasion pattern Delta. It's in our database. Of course it is, Morrison said. They've been using the same patterns for decades. Confidence makes them predictable. Fire when ready. The Endurance's primary weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had seen in modern warfare. While other species had perfected energy weapons, plasma cannons, and guided missiles, humanity had gone in a different direction. They had taken an ancient concept and refined it to devastating perfection. Kinetic artillery, the magnetic rails along the Endurance's hull charged with barely audible hums. Inside the weapon bays, solid projectiles made of dense alloys were loaded into firing chambers. These were not missiles with engines and guidance systems. They were simply very hard pieces of metal, shaped for optimal ballistic performance. But they were launched at a significant fraction of light speed. The first shot left the Endurance's starboard rail with no visible flash, no bright energy beam that would warn the target. It was simply there. And then it was not. The projectile crossed the distance to its target in under 2 seconds. A Crethon cruiser executing an evasion maneuver suddenly found itself occupying the same space as several kilograms of metal moving at relativistic velocity. The kinetic energy released was comparable to a small nuclear weapon. The cruiser simply ceased to exist, replaced by an expanding cloud of plasma and debris. The second shot followed before anyone could react. Another Crethon vessel, this one trying to dodge left while accelerating, moved directly into the path of a projectile that had been fired to intercept it at that precise point in space and time. Targets 3 and 4 neutralized, Cooper reported calmly. Adjusting firing solutions for targets 5 through 8. Across the Dalmar system, every military force watched in shock as the human ship methodically destroyed Crethon vessels with weapons that seemed to anticipate their movements. The Crethon fleet's greatest advantage, their speed and unpredictability, had become their fatal weakness. Krexnar tried to coordinate a response. All ships. Random evasion. Do not follow any pattern. Weapons. Target that human ship. All batteries. Fire. 24 Crethon cruisers opened fire simultaneously. Plasma bolts and missile salvos converged on the Endurance from multiple angles. It should have been overwhelming firepower, but the Endurance was moving now. Really moving. The ship that had appeared slow and clumsy now danced through the incoming fire with practiced grace. Missiles chased empty space. Plasma bolts splashed harmlessly against defensive screens or missed entirely, and all the while, the kinetic artillery kept firing. Amy Patterson monitored her engineering displays with satisfaction. Reactor output at 95%, all systems nominal, cooling systems handling the load perfectly. How long can we sustain this rate of fire? Morrison asked. Hours, sir. We brought enough ammunition for an extended engagement. The Crethon have speed. We have math. Another Crethon ship exploded. Then another. The projectiles did not chase their targets. They simply appeared where the targets would be, as if the human weapons could see the future. Cooper's targeting computer analyzed each ship's movement pattern, recognized the evasion tactics from the extensive database, and calculated the optimal intercept point. The Crethon tried desperately to become unpredictable. They jinked left and right at random intervals. They cut engines and drifted. They accelerated at maximum thrust in unexpected directions. But humans had been studying warfare for thousands of years. They had fought each other in conflicts spanning continents and oceans, and eventually stars. They understood that truly random behavior was almost impossible in combat. Biology and training created patterns. Fear and instinct created patterns. And patterns could be predicted. A Crethon commander made a brilliant maneuver. Killing his ship's engines, and allowing momentum to carry him past his expected trajectory. The kinetic round fired at his original course, missed by 50 meters. For a moment, he thought he had found a counter to the human weapons. Then a second projectile, fired 3 seconds after the first, struck his ship exactly where it had drifted to. Cooper had predicted the prediction. Calculated what an intelligent commander would do when avoiding the obvious intercept point. The Crethon fleet, which had entered the Dalmar system with confidence and overwhelming force, found itself being systematically dismantled by a single human ship. Krexnar watched 12 of his cruisers reduced to debris in the span of 5 minutes. The Crethon fleet scattered like startled fish, each ship racing toward the system's edge where they could safely engage their faster-than-light drives. War leader Krexnar's flagship led the retreat, its engines burning bright as it tried to put distance between itself and the human vessel that had shattered his invasion in minutes. Captain Morrison watched the tactical display with calm attention. The fleeing Crethon ships were still well within weapons range. Ben Cooper already had firing solutions calculated for each target. One word from Morrison, and the Endurance could destroy the entire fleet before they escaped. Sir, we have clean shots on all retreating vessels, Cooper reported. Recommend we eliminate the threat completely. Morrison considered for a moment, then shook his head. Negative. Let them go. We've made our point. Cooper looked surprised but followed orders. Aye, sir. Weapons holding. Around the Dalmar system, the Council forces remained in position, their crews still trying to process what they had witnessed. The Vextari interceptors that had been chasing Crethon ships for hours now floated idle, their pilots staring at sensor readings that made no sense. The Luminar destroyers had stopped firing entirely, their crystalline hulls pulsing with colors that indicated complete confusion. Lieutenant Linda Hayes received incoming transmissions from at least 20 different ships simultaneously. She filtered through them quickly. Sir, every Council vessel in the system is requesting explanation. The Vextari commander wants to know what weapons we're using. The Luminar captain is asking how we predicted Crethon movements. and several ships are asking why we're letting the Crethon escape. Open a general channel, Morrison said. Let's give them some answers. Hayes activated the communication system. Morrison's voice broadcast to every military vessel in range. This is Captain Morrison. To answer the obvious questions, the Endurance is designed for exactly this type of engagement. Our weapons are kinetic artillery, magnetic accelerators that launch solid projectiles at relativistic speeds. Our targeting system uses predictive algorithms that analyze movement patterns and calculate intercept points. As for why we're letting the Crethon retreat, we're here to protect the Dalmar colonies, not commit wholesale slaughter. A new voice came through the channel. It was Krexnar, transmitted from his fleeing flagship. The Crethon commander's tone had lost all its earlier mockery. Captain Morrison, I demand to know how you accomplished this deception. Your ship was slow, heavily armored, practically defenseless. Now I find it is one of the most dangerous vessels I have ever encountered. This was deliberate trickery. Morrison allowed himself a slight smile. Yes, war leader, it was. The armor plating was removable, designed to make us look like exactly what you expected. A slow, outdated ship that posed no threat. The reduced speed was intentional, keeping our reactor at minimum output to conserve power and maintain the illusion. Everything about the Endurance's appearance was calculated to make opponents underestimate us. But why? Krexnar asked. Why go to such lengths? Because wars are not won by the fastest ship or the strongest weapon, Morrison replied. They're won by the side that controls the battlefield, that dictates the terms of engagement. You built your entire military doctrine around being faster than everyone else. You relied on hit-and-run tactics, using speed as your primary advantage. So we built a ship specifically to counter that advantage. Amy Patterson added information over the channel. The armor we dropped was modular, designed for quick removal when needed. During peacetime operations, it serves as additional protection and makes our true capabilities invisible to potential enemies. When combat begins, we shed the armor and deploy our actual systems. A Vex Tari voice joined the conversation. But those weapons, this kinetic artillery, we have records of similar technology from ancient times. Most species abandoned such primitive approaches centuries ago in favor of energy weapons. How are your projectiles so effective? Ben Cooper answered that question. Energy weapons are powerful, but they have limitations. They travel at light speed, which seems instant, but is still predictable. Guided missiles are smart, but they can be jammed or confused. Our kinetic rounds are simple metal, but they're launched with such velocity that they cross combat distances in seconds. Most importantly, we don't aim at where you are. We aim at where you will be. Impossible, another voice protested. Movement in combat is random. You cannot predict random actions. Actually, we can, Cooper continued. True randomness is very difficult to achieve, especially in combat. Biology creates patterns. Training creates patterns. Fear and instinct create patterns. Humans have been studying warfare for thousands of years. We have extensive data on how different species respond to threats. The Crethon evasion tactics, for example, are in our database going back 3 centuries. You've refined them, made them faster and more efficient, but the core patterns remain unchanged. There was a long silence. Morrison could imagine the military commanders processing this information, understanding the implications. A weapon system that turned an enemy's consistency against them. The better trained and more experienced the opponent, the more predictable they became. War leader Krexnar spoke again. And this time his voice carried something other than anger or confusion. It carried respect. Captain Morrison, my people have dominated galactic warfare for generations. We believed speed was the ultimate advantage. You have proven us wrong in the most definitive way possible. I have lost 15 ships and hundreds of warriors today. But I have also learned something valuable. The humans are not to be underestimated. I hope the rest of the galaxy learns that lesson too, Morrison said. Not because we want to fight, because we want to prevent fights. If potential enemies know what we're capable of, they might think twice before starting conflicts. A new transmission came through, this one from the Council forces. A Valorian commander who had arrived with the second wave of reinforcements spoke carefully. Captain Morrison, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I must ask, how many ships like the Endurance does humanity possess? Morrison glanced at Amy, who gave a small nod. They had discussed how to answer this question. The Endurance is the first of her class, Morrison said. But she is not the only one. Humanity has been building similar vessels for 5 years. We have 12 currently in service, with more under construction. Each is designed with the same principles. Appear weak, hide your strength, and when battle comes, be absolutely devastating. The implications of that statement rippled through the system. 12 ships that could each single-handedly destroy fleets that had been considered unstoppable. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted dramatically in the span of one engagement. Amy checked her engineering displays. Sir, we're receiving damage reports from the Dalmar surface. The Crethon bombardment destroyed several cities, but casualties are lower than expected. Most civilians reached evacuation shelters before the strikes hit. Good, Morrison said. Linda, contact the Dalmar government. Offer whatever assistance we can provide. Medical support, engineering teams, whatever they need. Already on it, sir, Hayes replied. They're extremely grateful. They say if the Endurance hadn't arrived, the entire colony would have been destroyed. Morrison felt the weight of those words. If they had followed council orders and stayed away, thousands of people would have died. Sometimes disobeying orders was the right choice. The council forces began moving toward the planet to assist with rescue operations. The Vex-Tari interceptors, no longer needed for combat, shifted to evacuation support. The Luminar destroyers began clearing orbital debris to make safe lanes for relief ships. And through it all, the Endurance maintained position near the planet, its weapons still active, sensors scanning for any sign of Crethon return. The armor plating that had been jettisoned floated in nearby space, recoverable later when time permitted. A private communication came through to Morrison's command chair. It was Krexnar again, speaking only to the human captain. Morrison, before I leave this system, I want to know something. Did you enjoy making fools of us? Did you take pleasure in our humiliation? Morrison considered his answer carefully. No, war leader. I took no pleasure in destroying your ships or killing your people, but I did take satisfaction in stopping your attack and saving innocent lives. That's what the Endurance was built for, not to dominate or humiliate, to protect. A noble sentiment, Krexnar said, and his tone suggested he might actually mean it. Perhaps that is what makes you more dangerous than your weapons. You fight not for glory or conquest, but for protection. That makes you unpredictable in ways my people have never encountered. Maybe that's something worth thinking about, Morrison replied. The transmission ended. On the long-range sensors, the last Cretho 2 weeks after the battle at Dalmar, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. This time, the meeting was not held in the usual chamber. Instead, the Council gathered in the high-security briefing center, a location reserved for matters of critical importance to galactic stability. Captain Jake Morrison entered the chamber with his senior officers. Amy Patterson carried several data storage devices containing technical specifications. Ben Cooper had prepared detailed tactical analysis. Linda Hayes walked beside Morrison, ready to handle any communications issues that might arise. The chamber was packed. Every major military power in the galaxy had sent representatives. The Valorian High Command was present in force. Vex-Tari fleet admirals occupied an entire section. Luminar strategic planners clustered near the front. Even races that rarely attended council meetings had sent observers, and at the back of the chamber, isolated and watched carefully by security, sat war leader Krexnar and 2 other Crethon officers. The Empire had sued for peace within days of the Dalmar defeat. Now they were here to witness the discussion of the tactics that had destroyed their reputation as unstoppable warriors. The council coordinator, the elderly Valorian who had dismissed the Endurance as too slow, called the session to order. Her silver skin seemed somehow dimmer than before, as if the events of the past weeks had aged her significantly. "We are gathered," she began, "to discuss the implications of the engagement at Dalmar. Specifically, to understand the human military doctrine and its effect on our collective security. Captain Morrison. The Council requests a full briefing." Morrison stepped to the central platform. A holographic display activated above him, showing a rotating image of the Endurance in both its armored and unarmored configurations. "Thank you, Coordinator. What you witnessed at Dalmar was the result of 5 years of development by Earth's Military Research Division. The Endurance-class warship represents a fundamental shift in how humanity approaches galactic warfare." He gestured, and the hologram changed, showing footage from the battle. Crethon ships scattering, kinetic rounds finding their targets with impossible accuracy. The systematic dismantling of a fleet that had been considered among the galaxy's best. For decades, we observed galactic military doctrine from the outside. We saw that most species followed similar patterns: build faster ships, develop stronger weapons, refine tactics around speed and firepower. The Crethon took this approach to its logical conclusion and dominated warfare for generations. Krexnar shifted in his seat but said nothing. Morrison continued. Humanity asked a different question. Instead of trying to be faster or stronger, we asked how to counter opponents who relied on speed and strength. The answer was deception and prediction. Amy Patterson took over the technical portion of the briefing. She displayed schematics of the modular armor system, the fusion reactor's variable output capabilities, and the kinetic artillery's firing mechanisms. The Endurance was designed to hide its true nature, Amy explained. The armor plating serves multiple purposes. It provides protection during peacetime operations. It disguises the ship's actual mass and acceleration capabilities. And most importantly, it creates a specific impression in observers. When you see a slow, heavily armored ship, you make assumptions about its role and capabilities. A Vex Tari admiral interrupted. But this is deception. Military vessels are required to transmit accurate specifications to Council databases. You falsified your ship's performance data. No, Amy said firmly. Every specification we provided was accurate for the ship in its armored configuration. We simply did not mention that the armor was removable, or that our reactor was operating at minimal output. There was no falsification, only selective disclosure. The Admiral buzzed with irritation but could not argue with that logic. Technically, humanity had followed all regulations. Ben Cooper stepped forward to explain the targeting systems. Our kinetic artillery succeeds because it exploits a fundamental truth about combat. Skilled opponents develop patterns. The better trained you are, the more reliable your responses become. This is true for all species, including humans. Our targeting computer contains 3 centuries of data on galactic military tactics. He displayed complex mathematical models on the hologram. We can predict, with 90% accuracy, how a given ship will respond to specific threats. The Crethon evasion patterns, for example, have been refined over generations. That refinement makes them incredibly effective against conventional weapons, but it also makes them predictable to our systems. A Luminar strategist pulsed with curious colors. You are saying that military excellence becomes a weakness against your weapons? Not weakness, Cooper corrected. Predictability. There's a difference. A well-trained force is still dangerous and effective, but if you've been using the same core tactics for centuries, there's enough data to predict your movements. Our system learns and adapts. The more we fight an opponent, the better we understand their patterns. Morrison reclaimed the platform. This brings us to the larger implication. The Endurance is not just a single ship. It's a demonstration of a new approach to warfare. Humanity has built 12 vessels of this class. Each one is designed to appear as something it is not. Each one is equipped to counter specific types of opponents through prediction and deception. He let that information settle. 12 ships that could each do what the Endurance had done at Dalmar. The military representatives in the chamber were making rapid calculations about what that meant for their own forces. But we're not here to threaten anyone, Morrison continued. We're here to offer an alternative to the endless cycle of building faster ships and bigger weapons. Earth proposes a new military doctrine for the Galactic Council, one based on strategic thinking rather than technological superiority. The Council coordinator leaned forward. Explain what you mean by strategic thinking, Morrison smiled. For too long, galactic military forces have focused on tactical advantages. Faster ships win battles, stronger weapons win engagements. But wars are not won by individual battles. They're won by the side that better understands their opponent, that can anticipate and counter enemy strategies, that can make the enemy fight on unfavorable terms. He gestured to Amy and Ben. Our engineers and tacticians spent years studying galactic warfare. Not to copy it, but to understand its weaknesses. Every military doctrine has assumptions built into it. If you can identify those assumptions and violate them, you gain an enormous advantage. A Valorian general spoke up. You violated the assumption that heavily armored ships are slow. You violated the assumption that kinetic weapons are obsolete. What other assumptions are you prepared to violate? All of them, Morrison said bluntly. That's the point. Humanity does not want to play by established rules of warfare. We want to change those rules entirely. Make combat so unpredictable and dangerous that potential aggressors think very carefully before starting conflicts. Krexnar stood up in his section. The security personnel tensed, but the Crethon commander simply wanted to speak. The coordinator granted him permission. Captain Morrison speaks truth, Krexnar said, his voice carrying across the chamber. The Crethon Empire built our reputation on speed and surprise. For 3 centuries, no force could match us in open battle. We believed ourselves invincible. Then, in less than 10 minutes, a single human ship destroyed that belief completely. He looked directly at Morrison. But it was not just the weapons or the speed. It was the understanding of how we think, how we fight. The humans studied us and found our patterns. They turned our greatest strength into our greatest vulnerability. This is not just new technology. This is a new way of thinking about warfare itself. Several council members nodded in agreement. They were beginning to understand the implications. Morrison continued his briefing. Earth is willing to share aspects of this technology with Council military forces. The kinetic artillery, the predictive targeting systems, even the modular armor concepts. But more importantly, we want to share the strategic philosophy behind them. What would this sharing require? The coordinator asked. Integration, Morrison said. Human military advisors working with Council forces. Joint training exercises. Strategy seminars at military academies. We want to help the galaxy move beyond the current doctrine of faster and stronger. We want to create a military alliance that thinks differently, that anticipates threats, that prevents wars instead of just fighting them. Amy added technical details. We're also proposing a research partnership. Human engineers working with Vextari technicians, Luminar scientists, Valorian designers, combining different species' strengths to develop new approaches, not just weapons, but defensive systems, communication protocols, strategic frameworks. The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives argued among themselves about the proposal. Some were enthusiastic, seeing the potential for dramatically improved security. Others were cautious, worried about human influence over military matters. A few were openly skeptical, questioning whether humanity could truly offer anything beyond one impressive ship design. The coordinator called for order. This proposal requires significant consideration. The Council will deliberate and provide a formal response within 30 days. Captain Morrison, your crew will remain available for consultation during this period? Of course, Morrison agreed. We're here to help in whatever capacity you need. As the session concluded and representatives began filing out, several approached Morrison privately. The Vextari admiral who had questioned their methods earlier buzzed apologetically. Captain, I admit I doubted your vessel when it first arrived at the Council. I was wrong. The hive mind has authorized me to request immediate consultation on adapting your predictive systems for our interceptor squadrons. A Luminar strategist pulsed with respectful colors. Our analysts have reviewed the Dalmar battle records extensively. The precision of your targeting was remarkable. We would appreciate any insights you could share about developing similar capabilities. Even some of the skeptical observers seemed interested. They might not trust humanity's motives completely, but they could not deny the effectiveness of human methods. Krexnar approached last. The Krython commander stood before Morrison with something like resignation on his scaled features. My empire sued for peace because we recognized the futility of continuing conflict, but also because we understood something important. Humanity did not need to destroy my entire fleet. You let us retreat when you could have annihilated us. This showed restraint. Wisdom. These are qualities we respect. We're not interested in conquest or humiliation, Morrison said. Just in keeping people safe. I believe you. Krexnar replied. And that makes you more dangerous than any weapon. Because you fight for principles, not glory. Principles do not compromise or surrender. The Krython commander turned to leave, then paused. The Empire will comply with the peace terms. But more than that, we will send our own officers to learn from your strategists. If humanity is willing to teach, the Krython are willing to learn. Better to adapt than to become obsolete. As Morrison and his crew left the council chamber, Linda Hayes expressed what they were all thinking. Sir, I think we actually did it. We didn't just win a battle. We changed how the galaxy thinks about warfare. Morrison nodded slowly. Maybe. Time will tell if they really embrace the change or just try to copy our technology without understanding the philosophy. But we've started something important here. Amy looked back at the chamber where council representatives were still arguing and discussing. Some of them will get it, some won't, but enough will understand to make a difference. That's all we can ask for. 3 months later, the Galactic Council formally accepted Earth's proposal. Human military advisors were assigned to all major council forces. Joint training exercises began at military academies across the galaxy. Research partnerships produced new defensive technologies and strategic frameworks. And the Endurance returned to human space for a refit. Maintenance drones reattached the heavy armor plating that had been recovered from the Dalmar system. The ship once again looked slow and bulky and unremarkable. But now, everyone who saw it understood the truth. The slow ship was not weak. It was patient. It was strategic. It was everything that modern warfare had forgotten in the rush for speed and power. And across the galaxy, potential aggressors looked at their own military doctrines with new uncertainty. If the Krython could be defeated so decisively by rethinking basic assumptions, what other vulnerabilities were waiting to be exploited? What other patterns could be predicted and countered? War did not end, but it became more cautious, more considered, less reflexive. Conflicts that might have erupted into full battles were resolved through negotiation instead, because now everyone understood that victory might not go to the fastest or strongest, but to the side that thought more carefully about how to fight. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair as the Endurance cruised toward Earth at its usual unhurried pace. On the view screen, stars drifted past in peaceful silence. Somewhere behind them, the galaxy was changing, learning new ways to approach old problems. It was exactly what humanity had hoped for when they built their slow ship and sent it out to be mocked and underestimated. Sometimes the best way to change the future was to be patient enough to wait for the right moment. And when that moment came, to be ready to show the galaxy something it had never seen before. N-ship crossed the system boundary and vanished into faster-than-light travel. The threat was gone. Ben Cooper secured the weapon systems. All batteries standing down, sir. The Krython are gone. We did it. We did, Morrison agreed. But the hard part is just beginning. Linda, prepare a full report for Council Command. Include detailed sensor logs, tactical analysis, everything. The Council is going to have questions, and we need to be ready to answer them. Amy stretched in her chair. You know they're going to ask us to share the technology. Every military force in the galaxy is going to want kinetic artillery and predictive targeting. Probably, Morrison said. And we'll consider those requests carefully. But first, We need to help the people down on that planet. That's why we're here. The Endurance moved slowly toward Dalmar, its powerful engines throttled back to a gentle burn. To any observer, it might have looked like the slow, careful ship that had been mocked just weeks before, but now everyone knew the truth. Humanity's slow ship was not a weakness. It was a statement, a demonstration of patience, planning, and the willingness to be underestimated until the moment action was required. And in that moment, nothing in the galaxy was faster or more dangerous. Human vessel moved through his fleet like a surgeon with a scalpel, precise and unstoppable. Every tactic that had worked for centuries against every other species was failing completely. War leader, we must withdraw, his tactical officer urged. We cannot fight this ship. It is like nothing we have encountered. Krexnar's pride warred with his survival instinct. The battle was already lost. Staying would only mean more deaths, but retreating from a single enemy vessel would be humiliating. The decision was made for him when another 3 cruisers exploded in rapid succession. The human ship was not slowing down. If anything, it was getting more efficient as its targeting computer gathered more data on Krethon tactics. Signal all ships, Krexnar said finally, his voice heavy with defeat. Full retreat. Emergency jump to rally point 7. The remaining Krethon vessels broke off their attacks and began accelerating out of the system, their engines burning at maximum to escape before the human ship could destroy them all. Tell them yes, Morrison said with a slight smile. Tell them the Endurance is coming. And tell them to keep their ships clear of our firing solutions when we arrive. The communications officer sent the message. The response was predictable. Council Command acknowledged but made it clear they expected nothing useful from the slow human ship. Morrison looked at his crew. Each face showed determination mixed with anticipation. They had trained for this. They knew what was coming. They just needed to get close enough. All hands, Morrison announced over the shipwide channel. This is the captain. Battle stations. Prepare for combat operations. This is not a drill. 1. Throughout the Endurance, crew members moved to their positions. Weapons, systems powered up. Defensive screens activated. And deep in the engineering sections, Amy Patterson's team began the startup sequence for systems that had been dormant since they left Earth. The slow ship continued its approach, heading straight into a battle it had no business entering. Is the human ship's trajectory with his tactical staff? One of his officers wondered aloud if they should be concerned about human involvement. Zalthor dismissed the worry with a wave of 2 hands. That ship will take days to reach its patrol zone. By the time any real conflict begins, they will be exactly where they cannot interfere. The humans are no threat. Forget about them. Far away, already accelerating into the darkness between stars, Captain Morrison heard a recording of that transmission. His communications officer had excellent connections. He smiled. Make a note in the log. Lieutenant Hayes. Commander Zalthor thinks we're no threat. I want to remember that quote. The Endurance continued on its way, slow and heavy, and completely underestimated.